first question is,
Yeah.
who are you?
Oh, yeah, that's a very, very difficult question to answer. Because normally the only thing we can understand is what happened in time and space. That's the way the mind functions, or is it in time or in space? And you are beyond. You are beyond time and space. You explode into time and space as a body and a psychology. But these two things are not real. Whatever appears in time and space is impermanent and not real. So it's also one of the things about the difference between ordinary therapy and spiritual therapy or non-dual therapy. In ordinary therapy, you come with whatever question to a therapist, and the therapist will ask you many questions and try to help you to encounter some deeper layers in it. But this is all in time and space. And the therapy, of course, has, and you also have this idea that it's something we had to get rid of. Or I had to get rid of this jealousy, or I had to get rid of this anger. And it can help to really talk a lot about it, and you accept it more and more and more. But you cannot get rid of something that doesn't exist. All these feelings and all these experiences has no independent reality. They are all, in a way, your enlightenment. All of them. So that you don't see before you really start understanding impermanence. Because whatever appears in time and space is impermanent. It doesn't last. It seems to be there, and we can put labels on it and words on it, and it makes it very real, but it doesn't stay. It changes all the time. So very, very few is really seeing this. But that is our great luck, because that's how we can wake up. Because we wake up by seeing that our anger, our sorrow, our jealousy, our pain is essentially our enlightenment. If you really go into it and see it's impermanent, we all come to who you are. We all come to this space where you know who you are. You cannot say it, because it cannot be said in time and space. It cannot be formulated in words. And we call it being sometimes, we call it the real self. And all these, the danger with all this is that, again, we go into time and space. The self was also very much used in the time of the hippies, but they meant something else with the self than the enlightened people, like Ramana, for instance, mean. Ramana means the self is Atman, that which exploding into Brahman, the last very pure sense of existing. When that pure sense of existing has no label on it, no definitions, it suddenly is seen as the absolute. And you can only be it, you cannot know it in this way. You cannot say what it is, but you have no need to convince anybody about it. That's one of the sure sign of it, that you have no need to convince anybody. All the other people have so much need to convince, because if you can convince somebody else, you also convince yourself. What do you think all the Christian missionaries that went to Africa and India and all kinds, to try to convert, to change these poor native people? It was that then they could convince themselves, because it was just words, only concepts. Yeah. So, what did you ask? You asked?
The first question
Yeah, who
is,
I am.
who are you? And maybe because you have been floating into the second question, which is, what are you?
Yeah. 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 But none of these questions can be answered directly in time and space and what we understand. No, none of them. They will still leave doubt. Doubt will still be lingering around as long as there is time and space. As long as you are formulating living in time and space, doubt is just waiting to jump on you. So that's also why we could in a way say that who am I? I'm pure trust. That's one way. But again, don't think about trust as opposite to doubt. They come together. If I say to people it's trust, they say it's not doubt. No, it's beyond this. It's a trust that is beyond anything. And that grows when you start working really with yourself more and more and more. And one day you will say, but I cannot say anything else, but I'm just trust. Because, And again, we are brought up in a very, very, very low society. We can put a rocket to the moon, but we know nothing about the inner. And it's partly also because of Christianity that wanted to control us for all these thousands of years. That nobody should come in to know who he or she is. We burned all the Christian mystics and all the women also that claimed anything. They were burned. Because that was the worst thing you could say, I'm one with God. That was the Christian mystics' way of saying it. That I'm not created, I am God. That's one way to say it also. And that was the worst thing you could say. Because then there's no need for any church. There's no need for any politics. And it's the same in Islam and Judaism and Hinduism and all the organized religions. It's the same story again and again. Hinduism is not so cruel. It's more somehow part of this culture to awaken. 3,000 years ago, if you go back in Asia, it was a matriarchate. And many awakened people, it was women that was running the show and they had no ownership. Then came men in, the patriarchate, and started with ownership with the woman and with children, and then came all the cruelty, and so again we cannot say what it is. Many awakened people, if you have been asked, they try to get the question, I feel it. When Pontius Pilatus asked Jesus, who are you? And Jesus, he remained silent. Because somehow he tried to show Pontius Pilatus, that's who I am. I'm silent, it cannot be said. But of course he didn't get it. Nobody gets it, and Pontius Pilatus was very offended by it, like if Jesus didn't want to answer. But that was not the point. Jesus tried to show him his silence, his being, by just being there, looking at him. And of course we missed that in our understanding of Christianity. Yeah. So, who are you and what are you cannot be answered in our normal language. And that's why we call these people who have realized this mystics, because it cannot really be said. And in the East, many left family and society and went into the forest and just stayed there in small communities and lived together because they knew that there's no point of going into the society. and be caught up in ignorance. So we are living in ignorance. This whole culture is living in ignorance. That's why so many wars, so much pain is here, because you cannot cause any pain on anybody if you're awakened, because everyone is yourself. So this is impossible. As long as we live in duality, me and you, there's pain and war, and so from my point of view also, that it cannot be solved politically. It can only be solved the moment people will start questioning, who am I? Tatsvamasi, as Advaita says. And the answer in Advaita is that you are that. You are that and nothing else. Because that cannot be said. You are that. I am that. It's a very important thing to try to understand, that it cannot be solved in the ordinary way of thinking and behaving. In the ordinary way of thinking, there is always a me, even though nobody has ever found it. Nobody has found this me, but we use it 1,000 times a day here. Me, but who am this me? Nobody asks, very few. And if you really inquire, you wake up, because you will see there is no me. It's a mental construct that we learn to live in when we get conditioned. And again, if you go to India, and even here in Denmark, we have Sunyata Emanuel Sørensen. He is considered to be an avatar. That's what they will call him in India, because he never got it and he never left it. It was there all the time when he was born. And he says jokingly that, when I was a boy, I didn't want to be with other children, because it was a disturbance. So he stayed by himself. And of course, he lived in Aarhus, and nobody had any idea about who he was. He was just a weird guy. Then he came to England as a gardener. And Rabindranath Tagore came there from India and looked at this young man and said, you, Rabindranath could see him. You should go to India. They will recognize your silence. Nobody here, but in India. So he went to India, to Almora and also Ramana. And he stayed in it. He was an avatar, and so if you are born and you stay in it, in this innocence, really, which is very difficult. So in a way, we are born awakened, but layers upon layers of desires and unfulfilled hopes starts coming up the moment we have a body and we start getting lost in life. And especially here, there's nobody who knows anything here. Very few. And we think we live in such a high culture. It's such a joke. We would not have any mental hospitals and psychologists if people was becoming awakened. Yeah. Who I am and what I am. What am I? Do you have any more questions?
What is another?
Oh yeah, what is another? Yeah. If you identify yourself as an entity, with a me, with an I, you will have you and you will have another. another will appear simultaneously when you appear. But this, what we call me, is a mental construct. And nobody has found this me, but very few people look. Somehow we are scared of looking. And I think the fear is basically coming from Christianity. The Catholic Church killed more people than any war. And anybody who claimed anything was burned, ripped apart. With this Muslim, I forgot his name now, he was saying, Anal Haq, Anal Haq, Anal Haq, I'm him, I'm one with Allah. They said, stop! And he didn't stop. And they tie him to 4 horses. 1 horse to each arm, each leg, and they wiped the horses. He was split apart. Can you imagine? Because he's claimed his oneness with Allah. And that's the worst thing you can do. And this is very deep also in our collective mind that is somehow still around the fear of claim your oneness with the divine, because it cost your life. Because if this is so, there's no need for any church. And there's no need for this whole business of the church and politics. When 300 after Christ, Emperor Constantine uplifted the mystic tradition of Christianity those days to the state religion, and there were so many people killed. To uplift it to a state religion. Now everybody has to believe in it. So all the mystics those days were either forced to believe in this and claim this, or killed. We don't learn that in school, the history of Christianity. It's terrible. So what is another? There is no other, really. There's not even one, because one is still time and space. You cannot say that, but there is this. That. Then you haven't said anything of what it is. I am that. That's advice. I love it. Because then you have not said what it is. Because it cannot be expressed in words. But you can realize it. And deep in you, it is the only thing that truly is. And it appears as the million and million of things. This, that, or pure sense of existing, godliness, whatever, be careful with God. Godliness appears as all the experiences. Maya. In the East it's called Maya. Appearance. If you look into Maya, whatever you look at disappears. And that's why we can wake up. If you go to a shrink as a psychologist because you have so much anger, and the psychologist most likely will start asking you questions. Where do you think it comes from? And is it, how was your childhood and your father and your mother? And it can be good because you somehow meet someone who you can talk with about the anger, and that's beautiful. And that can help you to a certain degree to accept it. That there's someone who's not judging you, but actually listening to you, trying to explain why you get angry and how it keeps on coming up and sabotaging your life. It can be very, very good, but you don't get rid of anger by talking about it. And also not about expressing it. because you cannot get rid of something that has no intrinsic nature in itself. You can wake up to anger by really totally coming to your anger without labeling, without any language. That's what I call associated inquiry. Go in and feel the anger. After a little while, if you don't try to get rid of it, don't try to understand it, but just feel it, sense it, it most likely will change into another feeling. Sorrow maybe. Oh my God, anger is in a way to get rid of the sorrow. Ah. Then you don't stop. Then you relax into the sorrow. Do it all that you can. And after a while, it may come into a very low self-esteem. Maybe. Wow. Don't try to understand it. Feel it. And after a while, you'll become more and more silent because you start coming home to who you truly are. That which gives rise to these appearances. You go down the layers. And suddenly, but I'm free. I haven't solved anything. I just saw that there is no anger, it doesn't exist. I haven't get rid of it. How can you get rid of something that doesn't exist? And that's what people try. They go in psychology for years until they're so fed up and tired of talking about it that they stop. They haven't understood that's Maya. I have a bachelor in psychology myself, so I know. We never talked about who am I and what is the deeper things. And most of the professors, they were so unconscious and so little in touch with their feelings and their sexuality. Then we had parties in the Institute of Philosophy. I broke my collarbones in one of these parties because when they start drinking, these people, these professors, go totally crazy. They would be fighting with the women on the floor and try to get the pants off. And all this repressed came up. So I stopped going to these parties. But I learned a lot. How ignorant we are. Yeah. You have anything else you want to?
One last question, Nukunu. What is life?
Yeah, what is life? Yeah, it's Maya. Its appearance. Its life is that all kind of things seems to appear and seems to have an existence and a reality. And as long as you stay in labeling it and analyzing it and conceptualizing, it seems real. The moment you start becoming quiet, start relaxing into this Maya, it's all disappearing. And it's a very amazing. And people sit for years until it starts happening. Because to make this computer silent is very, very, very difficult. And it doesn't become silent by using a mantra because it's also a doing. It's also an activity. So you can do a mantra, but then after a while you have to stop doing that also. Because who is repeating a mantra? I am. Who am I? So And the more you live in all these labels, concepts, the more real it seems. When you start becoming silent, slowly, slowly, when you start going for a walk without labeling anything, you suddenly come into a feeling that you are one with everything. And I think that's why many people like to go in the forest. And I also loved that when I was a boy, to get out of the madness in the 50s in the school with all the violence. When I came home from school, I went into the forest immediately. And I lived with the animals. I built huts in there, and in the evening I didn't want to go home to my violent father and all this. But of course I had to. So slowly, slowly start finding ways to be present. And if you're really present, you become silent. Because it's a moment that this presence start being disturbed by the past and the future, that you get lost. And this is desires. Often desires pulls you away from here now. Oh, avoiding this or grasping that. You are lost. So, it's a Maya who is the hindrance for our awakening. So go into Maya totally. Live totally with awareness. Come into it and really see, is it real? And it's not about labeling it and conceptualize, it's about experiencing it. If you really go into life and experience it without any words, you wake up. Buddhist has this mindful walking. That's one of the way you walk around Mount Kailash in China. Slowly, slowly, without thinking. You will wake up. But the problem is, can you stop thinking? And what is thinking? It's basically desires. So that's why it doesn't work by repressing anything either, because it will just add to your thinking. No, live totally. And live so totally in the moment that you see it doesn't really exist. Also really what you want, and really also what you don't want. But I know people forget to be present when they really get what they want. I'm reminded about one of my moments of coming home, and it actually happened very spontaneously when I was just 18 years old, and I have not learned anything about Maya or mysticism. I was brought up as a painter on the countryside, and every once a month I went to the local ball and picked up a girl. And this evening I had my father's car, so I also was lucky to get up a good steak. And I took her home in the car, and we sat in the living room. And for some reason, we just sat and looked into each other's eyes on the sofa. I didn't touch her in this moment. I didn't kiss her. We didn't talk. I was just sitting and looking into her eyes. And suddenly I had a feeling of, that's what I came for. That's it. But of course I had no words in any way for it. And in this moment when I sat there with her, I believed it was her who did something to me. But no, she was just a mirror. She was just a projection. And suddenly I felt, my God, the beauty is in me, it's not coming from her. How can she put beauty into me? She cannot. No, she can be what she is, that is so perfect. And then the beauty in me is mirrored. And that was actually the first time I saw through it somehow. But of course I forgot it immediately, and I had no words, and I brought up in a culture that has no idea about it. So it's very difficult. You have to somehow hear about it or to try to understand, but she cannot give you love. She can mirror the love that is in you already. She can be a perfect mirror. So that was in a way my first experience of this place, where I felt that's what I came for. Wow. And of course I fell in love with her. I thought it was her. So I don't know how long time I was struggling with her, trying to get it again, try to get her to give it to me. This is falling in love. It's in a way falling into yourself. And falling in love maybe last a week or 2 weeks. And then you start struggling. Can you not be like you were the other evening with me? And why are you saying this? You know I don't like it. And then starts the battle. Because you want her to be a mirror again. Enlightenment, self-realization, is the most intimate, the most real in life. All this is Maya. Body is coming and going. We never really die. There is nobody who can die. But what happens is that the body-mind stops appearing in consciousness. Suddenly it's not appearing anymore. It has not died because it has never lived. There's just one day it doesn't appear anymore. And we say the guy is dead. Yeah. But when you start going into it, you see that the West is so lost. It's really a pain. I'm so grateful I had the chance to go to India and meet Ramesh Balsakar, also the GM teacher, and Yogananda, and all these that starts talking about life in a different way. That was really making it responding in me. Of course. Maharishi Mahesh was the first one with transcendental meditation. Yeah. Maybe that's it.
Thank you so much, Nukunu.